Namaste, my friends. Welcome to Happy Jack Yoga Podcast. My name's Happy Jack, live from Harvard Innovation Labs in Boston, Massachusetts, for the grand finale, the last official event from Harvard campus. And I'm here live with.
Happy Hannah, and I am at the headquarters in Canada.
Amazing. Yeah, it's getting real. Like it's over. Here's how we know it's over. My family visited last week. They were here in Boston for the week, and graduation happened. I'll share more about that. And yesterday, I went to the library to do some work and swiped my card and can't get in. No longer do I have access. Now I guess I can get alumni access, but I guess like at 5 p.m. on the day of graduation, we lost access to everything. Emails getting shut down. I don't even have visibility to my grades anymore. It's like it's a real deal. It's complete. The chapter is closed.
Wow, that's abrupt.
I know it happened fast. I thankfully I made note of my grades. I wanted to calculate my GPA. It's 3.85, if that means anything to anybody. It's not a term we use much in Canada. Um, but yeah, I guess they gave us, a notice that we were going to be losing these access. But it makes it real when you go and show up at the library because you just want to do some work and you can't get in anymore. But it was a beautiful week last week. Having my family, my parents came from Canada, my sister Maria and her husband Wes and their three kids came, and then my Aunt Bev, who actually lives here in Boston, hosted everybody and was also part of the commencement festivities. But it was really nice. I felt really nourished and really present and enjoyed our time together.
That's so beautiful. And now think about like this wrapping up. Today is our 130th podcast episode, and the very first one was recorded on Harvard campus
Yeah.
um, 2 years ago. Is that
That's
accurate?
right. September of 2023. That's right. The basically kicking a Labor Day weekend, September, the fall of 2023, as I was beginning second year here, I mean, this is just a great reminder of like sometimes things are a dream. So those listening might have a dream of starting a yoga or creating a yoga retreat or a yoga workshop, and this podcast was like a dream and an idea for multiple years. And then eventually we drew the line in the sand. We set a date. We created a Zoom link, and here we are, 130 episodes later, 130 weeks later. I don't think we've missed a week, right?
No, I don't think you can count like that because we also uploaded the Bhakti Yoga Conference
Mm.
episodes.
Yes.
And we did miss 1 week because we had the final event on one of the weeks, or yeah, in the spring, this spring in April.
Okay.
Mhm.
Right. Yeah, so that's true. We had the Bhakti Yoga Conference has also contributed towards the episodes. But anyways, a lot of episodes, a lot of sharing, a lot of connection. And it's the completion of a phase. And at the same time, as I was saying, it was really nice having my family here. Of course, for the graduation and just spending time together, walking around Boston. And I brought them to the ashram. In fact, well, actually, they wanted to come to the ashram. I would have been happy for them not to, because it's kind of hard to explain, right? It's like you've seen it, Hanna. It's like a slice of India right in the middle of, posh downtown Boston, about the most expensive place you can live. But that has nothing to do with me and my economical circumstance. It just happens to be they got this place, 60 years ago, and it's a little sliver of India. And I sleep on the floor there. But my family, they were just so curious. What could it possibly be like? Why would Jack? Because they'd been to my apartment before, and I had a nice little apartment on campus. So they were really curious of why I would give up my nice apartment to sleep on the floor and share space with a roommate from Croatia, a nice guy. And so they came. They had food. We had a big vegetarian feast. You know, for those who are on, you can see I always wear this Tulsi necklace. And so Maria and her three boys, they all wanted a Tulsi necklace. So they all got a little necklace, a yogi necklace. And Maria got a book. And so, hey, you know, they're open, curious. But I really felt that, you know, especially from my sister and her husband, Wes. I felt even though they come from, you know, very, very connected to their Christian tradition, I felt that they were really open and curious and respectful and wanted to learn more about this tradition, you know, this path of yoga. So that was really refreshing to see.
Yeah, that's good to hear because I know you were not sure if you wanted them to come to the ashram, so I'm glad it went well.
Yeah. I mean, as I think you saw my sister yesterday, and the word, you know, one of the words she used to describe the environment was sketchy. And that comes, I see some smiles. The reason that comes is because it's so old. They acquired the property like, you know, in the late 1960s or something. And so the railings are very low. And so my whole family, right? My brother, my sister's husband, my sister-in-law, you know, they're all in the construction business. They kind of know what the codes are and what the requirements are. And so railings, like if you think about railings on stairs, they have a minimum height requirement, right? So that somebody can't like easily fall over the railing. And they just couldn't believe it because here at the ashram, the railings come up somewhere between your knees and your hip. Like it's kind of like halfway between your knee and your hip, quite low. And the spiral staircase goes up 4 floors. So, you know, from the 4th floor, you look down and you see the bottom. So they thought, you know, for me, this is home. But, you know, they noticed these little things and these little details. But it
Well,
was funny. We had good
I'll tell
time.
you, I'm not in constructions, and I would use similar terms to describe the environments because I don't think there's been a lot of renovations since the 1960s.
It's true. You know, we focus on what's the priority. We're focused on service and contribution and worship and love. Yeah, but no, for sure, there's some opportunity. But it really was a nice time, and it's nice, you know, just slowly being able to share my world, my path, you know, with family, so they get a sense of what it is that I'm up to, and let's see what's next.
Yeah, what is next, Happy Jack?
Oh my goodness, there's so much next. I'll tell you I've probably said this many times on the podcast. What I really need is some quiet time. Like just to go, you know, we did it last time. You want to know some, I mean, Hanna, you're going to fully understand this, but this is no excuse. And this is embarrassing or sad,
Or
but
both.
or both. You know, I mean, so badly I want to go and just be in the nature and just like disconnect. And this is embarrassing, but it's so true. Like it's so bad, I just want to do that. But you want to know what my resistance is to doing that?
I'm so
Be-
curious to hear.
because I'm not going to have the ashram or my mother or you with me. Can you guess what I'm going to be struggling with?
No.
Preparing food.
Oh my God.
Right? I mean, that's one thing. I know Yara's like her mouth dropped. Sue says mosquitoes. No, I have no problem with mosquitoes. This is something I recognize with myself. Like uh, when it comes to food preparation, I mean, respect for all of you out there that grocery shop and prepare food and do dishes. Of course, I've done all that. I've done it for many years at different stages of life. It takes time, and probably I have to shift my mindset on it. But it's like it would be, in one sense, it would be so nice to go into an environment and just kind of be on retreat, so I could just journal and just reflect and just be in the nature and not have to prepare meals.
But you
And
can't because you won't survive.
yeah, it's kind of a requirement, right? So now I'm like, huh, can I go on a sabbatical and like, sneak Hanna or my mom or somebody in? And no, I'm just teasing. But yeah, but seriously, I'm craving that, like just some downtime, some quiet, because I'm in a sense overwhelmed in a good way, but like you could say overflowing with good ideas and what's next. And you make the face of like, no surprise. But like there's so many ideas and so many projects and so many exciting things. I feel like I just need to pause and breathe and make sure that we are moving forward on what matters most. And I'm good at filling my schedule, as you know, and I think that this pause is calling.
Yeah. And if you go somewhere for a retreat, I know you've lived in Boston on your own before you lived at the ashram. You would have your Whole Foods shopping list and you would organize your life. I'm sure you can do that for a week in the forest. You just bring your salads and hummus and you'll be fine.
That's true, eh? Yeah, Yada's nodding. She's like, "You can do it, Jack."
You can
No, it's
survive.
true. I can't. No, it's true. And I need those little reminders. It's as silly as it sounds, because I have other strengths, Hanna, and I do have some strengths, but I also have some limitations and some weaknesses and
Growth
some
opportunities.
and growth opportunities. Yeah. This is something too. Here's a topic I wanted to, I'm just very open. Um, so I love feedback on, as you know, Hanna. So a friend, really more of a mentor, somebody I look to as a teacher and as a mentor, reached out to me a week ago, and I shared the message with you, Hanna, and it kind of, caught me off guard. But this friend slash mentor reached out and said, essentially, well, actually, I should read the message so I don't uh, mess it up. So basically, Happy Jack, please forgive me for asking something a bit personal, but I wanted to check in with a quick question. In the course of my services, particularly in counseling, I sometimes play a role in helping yogis connect with potential partners. I was wondering if marriage is something that you're open to or considering in the future. And if so, would you mind, would you be open to me reaching out if I come across someone who might be a good match, with respect and well wishes? And so when I saw it, I was a little bit like, whoa, I've never had anybody, say, reach out with that kind of message before. And in one sense, I get a little bit nervous, and it's like I've to imagine, somebody matchmaking, but at the same time, if somebody who knows me well and somebody knows someone else well and they make an introduction and there's no attachment to outcome, because obviously there's got to be chemistry and it's got to feel like the right fit for both of us. But in that sense, like, I would be. Sue says, don't do it. And yeah, don't worry, Sue, I'm not going to be rushing into marriage. I've done that twice, so there's no rush for the third one. But it had me thinking, and this is where, I'm just, I guess as I think of it, I don't know, Hanna, this is maybe where you're going to tease me, or you're going to tell me that this is not how it works. But as I think about it, there's certain things I think about as I consider meeting a partner, whenever that is, things that could be important for me. And maybe some of these, Hanna, you would agree, are like, no, that's a valid request or requirement based on your beliefs or lifestyle, and other things you might be like, let go of that one. But I made a few notes here. So it seems to me it would be helpful if the individual was vegan, or close to vegan, vegetarian for sure, because that would match nutrition wise, right?
Your chef needs, because you just revealed to us that you cannot
Exactly.
make food and you cannot go on retreat because you don't know how to make food. So it
Well,
has to be someone
that
who
was one of the other that was one of the other ones coming up is somebody who loves to cook. I gotta be honest and transparent. I will contribute other aspects to a relationship. Like I will, right? Like I bring, Hanna's like, you don't bring very much to a relationship. No, I can bring something to a relationship. I hope, I think, I know.
Yes, you do. Of course you do.
And one of them is not cooking. Although, I can stand around and help. Like if you're like, Jack, cut the pepper. I will stand there and in the time it takes me to cut the pepper, you'll have done the onions, the garlic, the this, the that, and 10 other things.
Yeah,
But
and
I will.
also you will do everything in your power to not have to cut the pepper. You're very gifted in that type of solution oriented.
Yeah, I'll go cut the grass. I'll cut the grass for an hour before I cut the pepper for 1 minute. That's just what I'd rather do. So, anyways, someone who shares similar nutrition, someone who's into fitness. Like that's something that I do 7 days a week, right? Either going to the gym or going for a run and definitely doing yoga every day. So that feels like something that would match lifestyle. Has the kind of ability to travel. Like not some people might be more of a homebody, which I understand and respect, and that's not my nature, right? I'll be traveling a lot, so someone who kind of has that freedom. Something this would be like a this would be like a nice to have, but not like a requirement. But somebody who leads kirtan, so knowing that Hanna, you and I were for so many years, right? We've been leading retreats and facilitating, and we're very comfortable in that. But if somebody who brought like that musical element could be like a really nice match or complement. Something else is very likely, although I'm not like drawing a line in the sand, but probably someone who doesn't want to have kids. Being at this stage, kind of knowing the next few years how they're mapping out. It's going to bring me into my mid to late 40s. Again, I'm not totally closing the door, but probably somebody who's not intending to have children. And somebody, really the most important thing is somebody who's really serious about their spiritual life. Somebody who's really serious about this path of yoga, because it's become so important for me. And so these are just some bullet points I put on a piece of paper, and I knew you'd tease me about a few of them with regards to food, some of them more important than others. I guess I'm just sharing it. By the way, I'm not sharing it publicly on the podcast because I'm trying to find somebody in the community. Of course, I'm just sharing it because that's what we like to do, or that's what I like to do, is just be honest, and it helps me in kind of getting clarity.
Yeah, I think like it would make sense that you would look for someone outside of the community because it would be
Definitely.
kind of like unethical to mix with students or, people who are here for a spiritual purpose. But I think that you could share those thoughts with the person who sent you the message, because then that way you know that you won't be paired up with someone who might have different preferences for their lives. And then I was thinking as well that, like,
Mm.
the person we share our life with, this is what I've been thinking between myself and my current new relationship, is that the person that I share my life with, they are like making my life beautiful. They are
Mm.
kind of like a massive gift to me that I'm so grateful to get to learn from and do exciting things with. But my life needs to be happy on its own, and
Mm.
that's really important distinction. Like what we expect from the other person, um I don't know that it's right to put too much of our happiness onto that person. That
Mm.
being said, I know you're very independent. I would say like you're an avoidant. Like if you think about attachment styles, how people attach, you have an avoidant attachment style. Like clearly want to meet someone, but you're an introvert and also you're very like anxious about attaching yourself to someone because it has to be the right match and it has to know how to cook and make music and all those things that would be great. But there's a part of you that also feels like when you got that message you shared with me, and I, as I know you from all of our life together, you might find it somehow like there's a push and pull between connecting with people or not. Like it's not so easy for you to just launch yourself into, it seems like more like a rational process for you where you kind of weigh pros and cons, like rather than like falling madly in love and letting yourself go in that way into another person. Like those are just things for you to like think about, as because we also who we are, we bring that into the relationship. And it's not just the transactional. If it's not just the transactional relationship where you cut the grass and she cuts the bell pepper, then the reason why you're together would have higher purpose and uh, a deeper kind of currency to it. And are you really open for that? And how willing would you be to open your heart? And I know you would want to, but what stands in your way to feel like, oh, that's intimidating when they ask me to meet someone? Like there's this dance between wanting to let yourself go, but not really allowing yourself to. And also one thing that I think what I call the second marriage wisdom, now this time it will be third marriage wisdom, is that if we don't process what was hard in this relationship that you and I had, you're going to bring that into the next. And that's not about going on a retreat on your own for 5 years and then say, no, I'm ready. That's about what was it that was hard in intimacy with me, for example. What was it that felt threatening to you about that? Or what was it that, what are the ways in which you wish you would have been loved that you weren't in this relationship or in your first marriage as well? So if we are daring to really look at the difficult aspects of what happened, then we're just going to keep marching on into the world and into the next relationship and creating the exact same dynamics. Because what people say is we marry our business, we marry our like our childhood issues, we marry the challenges that we bring into the relationship, and we hope to heal those, right? And so I would rather look into myself and say, what parts of myself are still not, are underdeveloped, or what parts of me do I know that typically in relationship are difficult for me, and bring that to therapy and journaling and into a self-inquiry, so that we then, when we meet a person that we would like to create a life with, that we would have the stamina and the wisdom and the dedication and the kind of the tools, so that we can be fully, and have a different kind of relationship, because there's a reason why ours didn't work out, right? And both of us have we have something to do with it. Both of us came into that relationship with who we were at the time. And it's not just that we grew apart, it's because we weren't able to connect in the ways that you're now looking to connect with someone, right?
Yeah, no, so many great points. And for sure, I agree. I mean, for sure, I agree with the point that we can't look to a relationship to fill some need or to make us happy. I know that that comes from within. And this time in between relationships is so important. I think back to the time between my first marriage to you and I meeting. That was what, from 2009 to, that was 5 years. That 5 year period, 2009 to 2014. And of course, that was when I made some, revolutionary, life-changing decisions of, getting sober and finding yoga and becoming vegan and getting on this path. And so I feel that time was very important to upgrade who I am, and I feel like that's what I'm doing now, attempting to do as best I can since you and I uncoupled amicably 2022. That's been 3 years now, and I truly believe, and I think you can agree, like I have grown in that period. Still got lots of growth and work to be done, but that's how I see it, is that I'm becoming the person that I need to be, and know it, but at the same time recognizing it's a lifelong journey. So it's not like I can be attached to perfection and waiting until I'm at some unattainable, before I can allow myself to be in relationship. But I doing my best to work on that.
Yeah.
And
And that's great. And I think that you've gained a lot of incredible tools and aspects and dimensions and considerations from Bhakti Yoga, right? And that's really wonderful. And I would bring to therapy the things that didn't work with us, because those are not magically going to go away with the next person because of how they present, or it's not about the other person, right?
yeah, yeah. I mean, that's totally good advice. I guess I haven't. I'm just throwing this out there. Like I'm not actively seeking a relationship. It's just because this message came out of the blue and I was joking about the, not loving to cook. So I threw these ideas, and I just like being open and vulnerable. And so I'm not waiting for 2 years until I have clarity to share on the podcast. Okay, now I know, now I've got clarity, now I'm dialed in and I'm going to share it. But rather in the beginning when I'm navigating it, and I'm happy to share at this stage as well. But
Yeah,
that's good ideas for sure.
yeah. And I think there's value in sharing what you are navigating right now,
Mm,
um, and like report from the messy middle versus like, here's how I solved this
mhm.
thing in my life afterwards. That's a
Yeah.
different message.
Do you have insights though, like for yourself, if you brought those questions to therapy, reflecting on our relationship, things that, um, how you were showing up, or like kind of, is there reflections you have on that?
Yeah, and the way I see it is that our relationship is kind of like a training in a way. Like it trains me to see how I need to be loved and how I am able to allow myself to be loved. Like, really, at the end of the day, I think love is about self love. How we kind of like Tony says something about like standards or expectations, like, what are you willing to put up with? What's the saying he says?
You get what you tolerate.
Yeah. So in love too, if we settle for certain type of connection or certain routines where it's maybe we didn't have this, but like some couples might have a lot of nagging or um, conversations that they didn't have, and then it brings patterns into the relationship. Like things like that would be great things to look at. Like, what is it that is out of alignment? So in my case,
Mm,
the question for me is, how did you not love me that I would have needed to be loved because of circumstance and routines and personality differences, right? So
mm,
it's not to say that you were incapable, but in what we were in at that time, we didn't have that type of connection, right? And so my question then to myself is, how am I um I was 50% of that relationship. So I too have some say in it. I too contributed to it. And where do I need to take responsibility for that? So maybe I wasn't expressing it clearly, or um, maybe I was avoidant too, you know? And so these are things that I bring to therapy. And not just in therapy, I also now, when I'm in a new relationship, I step into that relationship knowing about myself, the fact that I might be avoidant in these areas because I grew up in a situation of neglect. So I'm used to catering for other people's needs. So I share that.
Mm.
And then we both know it. So it's not like some kind of mathematics that I'm trying to solve on my own. In
Mm-hmm.
therapy, it's something that I practice with my person, and they know this and they can understand it and hold it because maybe there's something else that they know about themselves, insecurities they might bring into the relationship. And I know about that. And so we help each other. We try to help each other to cultivate awareness around how the other person feels loved and would like to love, but it really is an inside job between me and me.
Mm-hmm.
What to me is threatening about being seen? Because the other person wants to see me. What parts of me am I not wanting to show? And what parts of me feels like this is deeply healing and fulfilling? Because we do heal in relationship. Because all of these, let's call them hiccups, they also were created in relationship, in our early relationships that we can't remember because we were so tiny. The patterns that we keep repeating, we're the ones who are kind of setting the stage up for them. We are the ones who are pulling the strings so that we can be avoidant in the ways that is convenient to us or matches the pattern we've always, manifested and created from early on. So I need to take responsibility for the ways in which I either um, love or don't love, or where my limits are, what my kind of my soft spots are, where things become sticky, you know, and then work on it on my own. And I'm lucky I can share everything with my person, so it feels very safe in that way, that I'm not
Mm.
alone in it. And that's also one of the key I find importances in relationship, is to not feel alone with
Mm.
the issues that we might notice about ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And that's
Yeah,
also where
that's
therapy can come in handy. If we don't know how to share it, or we don't really know what it's about, it's helpful to talk with someone who's neutral,
mm-hmm.
right? And can help us put words and figure out what it is. Because if we haven't worded it, if we haven't named it, it's difficult to share it or do something about it, right?
Yeah. That's good distinction. I mean, knowing that I work with my therapist Danya. We were just together yesterday, and truthfully, because I think probably with every or most relationships with a therapist, the client leads, or I don't know how to say it, but I come in, and what I want to talk about is what we talk about.
Yeah.
And so often we end up they're always amazing conversations, but I think they maybe end up being a little bit more like coaching, because I'm not sharing problems or something I'm stuck with. I don't know how to say this, but maybe maybe I should use some of the time to start, having these conversations with regards to relationship, if that's something that I'm, planning to move towards. Because I guess I'm always focused on like what's next in life, like life circumstance, and with our yoga community and spiritual path. But I never thought to kind of proactively, yeah, like
And
think,
and
proactively reflect on our relationship, and make sure that I'm not repeating things that were not working.
yeah, I think that's like for me, I think because it is such a deep yearning in all of us is to be in relationship, whether it's with the world or in an intimate one. I think it's really, really, I find it's deeply important. And like learning how we relate in a relationship. And I think what you can do in therapy as well, and therapists are used to this. If you tell your therapist, like, this is something that I've thought about, I would like to work on myself so that I don't bring the same patterns into my next relationship. And I would like to be challenged by you. If you say that to your therapist, they're not going to torture you. They're going to say, well, tell me more. What are the things that you've noticed? And they'll ask you good questions. They might help you in finding the areas even, and that they know, because it's really beautiful that your therapist, what we call that is client led, like when the client, like one of my mentors said to me, like, there's nothing more important I can say as the therapist than what the client has to say. What the client says is the most important thing always in therapy. So that helps me as a therapist to remember that even if I might have some theory and thoughts on what they say, the most important words uttered in any session come from the client's mouth. And that's what's going to create change and shifts. But as the therapist, they can kind of guide you and they can help you in that process. So if you share this ambition with your therapist, she'll take you there in no time. She's an amazing therapist. I think it's a missed opportunity. Like, that's like putting money in the bank if you work on the parts of yourself that you might not be so sure about, or that you might have, not really easily find words, perhaps.
I get that. And I guess the tricky part, I have to imagine, at least I can speak for myself and probably true for others, is that we have blind spots.
Yeah.
And I think that if my therapist were to interview you and my first wife, I think you guys could give, I'm not, it's going to be,
Yeah.
there's always two sides to the story. So it's not that, what I say is filtered and yours is like perfectly accurate. But hearing from you or Mel, would that be valuable? I say that jokingly, not well,
Right.
seriously, but just last night, I got a call from Mel. And sorry, I know, Mel, you don't want me talking about our relationship publicly, but then don't call, or because I share everything very openly. But she left a message. It's nothing bad, but she was like listening to some Tom Petty, right, classic rock and roll, and she's like reminiscing about the old days. And I loved hearing the song because it reminds me of my cousin Dan, who passed away a few years ago. But anyways, back to the question. You don't think that there's value in my therapist hearing a perspective, because you could say things that I'm not aware of, or I'm just totally blind to, or I'm not seeing as a problem, right? Because I've got it. It's like, hey, what I do is like right and it's best, and that tends
Yeah.
to be how many of us operate.
I'm sure I'm happy to come in a session with you because your therapist is so amazing, but also to support you. But I think that more than that, your therapist can take you there if you tell your therapist that you would want to. Like, she can, because what matters is not what I say or what Mel says. What matters is what you feel and think, because you're the center of your universe. Like, and you're the one who's going to have the shifts, and you have the answers inside of you. And your therapist is so good that she can help you get to the, like, that's what she's trained for. That's why she's not a coach. She's
Mm.
trained to help you find and put the spots and connect dots in new ways and create deep insight, that where the change comes from inside of you. As you make it make sense to you, you will have insights as you have the conversations with your therapist. So that's the good news. You already have it in you, and with her help, she will it's kind of like a process of awakening. Like it will reveal itself to you when you talk with your therapist, and she knows the questions to ask you. If you don't know where to begin, you tell her, and she will definitely, there's no doubt in my mind, like try it first, and if it doesn't work, I'm happy to come on a session with you and her.
Yeah.
But I have full confidence in her being able to help you better than I ever will, or my presence in your session ever will.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, she's actually like that's her main thing is relationship
Yeah.
therapy. Like she's not your traditional helping a person with depression, although she can. Like her main thing is relational therapy, helping couples. But that being said, as true as it all is, I still think that there could be a limitation. I think that I could avoid the most important things
Yeah.
and lead the conversation towards the things that I want to focus on. I just think that's, I don't know if it's human nature or my nature, but I think that people who know me could call me out better, no matter how good the therapist is, because it's client led, and I'm good at leading. And I think that you could directly say some things that
That would help.
that would just get to the,
I
like, look
Yeah.
here.
I mean, it doesn't have to be many things, Jack. One thing.
Yeah.
It's one conversation, one topic. It doesn't have to be like, hey, what about this and what about that? It really is, I think, trust that she can take you there. I would try that first. Tell her all the things. Tell her to listen to this episode or the minutes of this episode where we
Mm,
discuss this, and tell her, can we do a session where you lead me? Like, I know this is client centered and client led, but could you um, take it from here?
mhm.
And I have
Yeah.
full confidence that she will and she can. And I think that would be probably the best money's worth you've ever done in your whole entire life, because she's such an incredible therapist. And especially if her specialty is couples and relationships,
Mhm.
this is like a golden, to me, this feels like a divine alignment, golden opportunity, because you're not in a relationship and you're with the relationship expert. She
Mhm.
probably has incredible questions and insights and tools
Mhm.
to work with you.
Yeah, I'll bring it up next time. I mean, even just yesterday, I shared the message from my other mentor with her, and and I jokingly said, well, I said seriously, I said like no pressure, no expectation, but I said truthfully, you know me better than anybody. So if you know somebody that you think would be a good match, I would really value your um, suggestion or connection. But then I said, jokingly, you see how messed up I am, so probably you're not gonna want to connect me with anybody.
You're
But
not messed
honestly,
up, Jack, in
I'm
any
just
way.
joking.
There's
I know,
nothing wrong in you.
I
And
know.
all of us have opportunities for growth and depth, and we all are, you know, we're all, let's say, primed by how we grew up and how we interpret the world. And sometimes that isn't helpful in our growth. And that's why we can go to therapy. And I think that the problem, though, is that your therapist can't, it would be unethical for them to hook you up with someone. I don't think
Mm,
she will ever, she would never do that, because it's
mm,
kind of illegal. Just like
mm.
you can't get involved with your clients, you can't. I don't know if this is true, and maybe she could find creative ways of making it happen, but I don't know that she ever would.
Got it. Yeah, no, that's good. And I was just joking, anyways.
Well,
So now the big question, the overarching question. This is a yoga podcast. What does any of this have to do with yoga?
love is connection. This is actually centrally yogic.
Yeah.
100,000%. You can bring any verse from the Gita and make it relatable.
Mm.
because connection is everything. Yoga means union.
Yeah.
How do we relate to ourselves? How do we relate to each other? How do we love? That to
Mm.
me is very central to yoga, but yeah, it's got maybe less to do with yoga asana or pranayama techniques.
Yeah, but like you say, how do we love? What is the quality? Like there's conditional love or relationships, and then there's unconditional, right? Like true bhakti is just like unconditional, giving ourselves fully.
Yeah.
And we talk about, like, in our hero's journey, the importance as yoga teachers of, we don't have, the level of detail that we share on this podcast, we like being very open. Like, of course, you don't, as a yoga teacher, you don't need to go into this at a yoga class, obviously. But there's always an opportunity to create connection, and that comes through sharing some of our stories, some of our life, even if we don't get into all the messy details because we have an hour podcast. In a 1, 2, or 3 minute intro at the start of class, in setting a theme, or again, just being real, with the intention not for seeking sympathy, but rather of intention of creating connection, creating relatability. It's like, oh, like, even this yoga teacher who I look up
Who
to.
I put on a pedestal because people do that all the time to us and to all the leaders. We put them on a pedestal and we forget that they're just as um, imperfect, suffering human beings as I am.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And I think that makes it more, I mean, it's just so it's a good way that's a beautiful way to lead.
Yeah,
We believe,
yeah.
right? Like, not leading because of our title as the teacher, or not leading because of our intellect or with the knowledge that we have, but through our humanity,
Mm-hmm.
through being real.
Yeah, and then like even thinking about like this conversation on a spiritual level, like we saying that connection and bhakti is about unconditional love. So what we're discussing here in a context of relationship, but even just between ourselves, because remember how I said like love is about self-love. And if I think about it in my spiritual practice, what are if my love isn't unconditional to myself or my sense of God, then how can I offer that to you? So if I need to whip myself into shape and have all the qualifications and the perfect Lulu pants in front of the room, that's a lot of conditioning I put on myself in order to let myself be your teacher, allow myself to take a yoga teacher training, or connecting spiritually. If bhakti is unconditional love, so what are the conditions I'm putting for God to my community, to my people in my life? It's very transactional and very, very conditional love. So every time I sit down to meditate, can I be in the presence of my guru without an agenda, without asking for blessings? Like maybe I do that at another time. That's called prayer or journaling or setting intentions or affirmations. That's different than connecting with God unconditionally from the center of my soul, from the center of my
Mm.
beingness. So what we're discussing here are the different kind of ripples of what the conditioning is. That's why we go to therapy. We discuss our conditioning. What are the
Mm.
conditions that I'm putting on you, Jack, so that I can be your partner as in business? And of course, we have boundaries and systems in place for that so that we can
Mm.
best operate. And where is it that my love has conditions on you? And how does that how does it best flow between us
Mm.
or your future person? So in a way, it can be a very spiritual conversation and is actually a spiritual conversation. And
Okay, let me ask you.
mm,
Yeah, so let me ask you this. Um, I find myself, at least in this moment, not in like a negative way or bad way, but like some confusion is present, right? And I want to share some ideas here, but I don't want you to respond with your opinion, but rather, because I know what it is, but rather respond with how one navigates confusion or uncertainty. So again, coming back to relationships, there are many people in my life who I really look up to. Mars, right? Spiritual mentor. He is supports what you were saying of like the value of relation, how we crave relationship, and the value and the importance of intimacy. He's married and children and grandchildren, and so he's a householder, and so he's on that board. Dunya, my therapist, also married, children, you know, very much supporter of a meaningful, intimate relationship, and I know that's where you stand as well. There's other people who I genuinely look up to as well. Of course, monks, but that's a little bit unique. Who it's they find they've found and are creating a completely fulfilling life and meaningful life, and don't feel that is required. And so, without hearing your perspective, because I know it aligns more with Dunya and Mars, and that's great. As a person is approaching relationship or anything for that matter, any big life decision, and if there's kind of, I don't, maybe confusion's not the right word. A little bit it is, but just like uncertainty, it's like, because then it's like you say, I reflect back on my first two marriages, and it's like, okay, well, if there's this pattern of things that are not working, that I'm bringing or not bringing to relationship, is that my true inherent nature? Is it not meant to be? That I operate really well independently. I'm not just sitting around sulking, feeling lonely. I never feel lonely, right? I'm just busy doing my things. So how does, without giving me the answer or your perspective in support of the importance of relationship, how do you think one kind of discovers clarity and certainty in general?
I love this question, and there's so many ways we could look at it, but one would be, you know, we could admit that being in relationship is also hard work. So it's not just like love flowing left and right, but it's actually like commitment and work with oneself and the other person, and holding the space for the other person as they do their work, and having the patience with that. It's a lot of work in a way,
Mm.
like, and then in a monk's life, there's probably a lot of work as well. And I don't know that they are always blissed out and having the greatest time either. That's what we present to the world, but I'm sure there's suffering in it. And so it boils down to suffering, understanding that having a human life will inevitably bring some level of suffering. So it's kind of like you got to pick which kind of, like, I hear this a lot in therapy as well. And I know this from myself too. Like, we thought that if we are suffering, then something isn't right. If I'm not healed enough, like, then this yoga isn't working. If I'm doing all these practices and I'm still feeling some yearning in my heart, or you could say like um yearning for God, or yearning for connection, or yearning for that one thing that you kind of think you don't have, then it means yoga doesn't work, or the spiritual work doesn't work, or this path isn't for me, or this relationship isn't meant to be because it's making me suffer. But the whole paradigm shift, I wonder if it could be that we need to accept the fact that there is always going to be a part of us that we need to tend to, parts of us that carry pain, parts of us that do feel suffering, that do not always feel content, that do not always, even though we know that the ultimate truth is that we're not this body. But right now I'm in this body, and it will have its conditions, and it will do its trick on me. over and over again. And it doesn't mean that I'm not doing life right. So, what at the end of the day, for you to answer the question, should I live a monastic life or should I live a mundane life in terms of relationships and in the world? It's almost like the amount of suffering that is inside of you is going to determine for that. I think the monk has more suffering than you do, but I could be wrong. And I'm sure there's variations, and maybe some monks are just never had that. But if you look at the greatest so-called enlightened beings, I'm sorry to tell you, but most of them were suicidal. Eckhart Tolle, Amma, most Jeff Foster, I don't know if he's enlightened. Sadhviji, the amount of pain she went through is not for, like, we could say it's like normal in our society that people get raped and have anorexia and whatever other things she went through. And I don't know that she's enlightened, but she's dedicated herself as a nun to monastic life and service. It means she doesn't lift a salary. She's only here for service. If you and I call her now, she's kind of bound to say yes, because that's her way of serving. And she will do it with love in her heart. But it wasn't because she was so high vibe. She didn't pick that life because she thought, hey, this is a great idea. It's because she was deeply suffering. So being a human being means to say, okay, like, you know how we often say, like, our parents did their best. Yeah, they did their best. And what they did has consequences. If we can accept, we can love them to death, and we always will. But the environment in which they brought us up, per nature, because nature is that way, it wasn't perfect. So it will leave its mark on me. And I know that about myself. That's where my weaknesses come from, right? I was a child of neglect. So that will predetermine how I show up in the world, in every relationship. But I work on it. I know that about myself. So to come back to your question, there's a part of you that yearns to be in relationship, because otherwise we wouldn't have this conversation. Otherwise you wouldn't read us the message from your friend who wants to help you find someone. It's not that they picked up on it, but they just, they maybe someone asked, like, hey, I would get to know him, or I'm looking for someone. Maybe it's not someone you even know, but they are just feeling out if you're interested. And if you're discussing it at length, it means there's a part of you that does yearn for deep connection with another human being. And these are things that only you will find out when you go into your retreat with your carrots and your bell peppers that you're going to have to cut yourself. You're going to get the answers. You're going to eat them whole, right? You're going to just take the bell pepper like an apple. So you're good.
That's how I do it. Yep.
You're good to go. And then you'll notice if your heart is more suffering around the conditions of your life, of being a soul in the universe who looks for God, like, then that might be maybe decisions that might lead you towards some monastic life, where you think that your primary concern is spiritually and philosophically to make sense of this world and be of service with everything that you are. You can say those both things, being in a relationship or in a monastic life. And some people have done both at some parts or periods in their lives. So does that make sense? Like the inner dissatisfaction, I think it's almost like we're afraid to admit that there is suffering. Look at the Buddha. He went through, like, he almost died before he figured out the middle path. So the suffering is part of our nature, and it's something that we can use. It's something that trains us, right? And it guides us in a way, and we can work with it, is what I think.
Nice. Oh, good. Deep reflections today. Stay tuned for episode 131, where we're going to have it all resolved and figured out. No, it won't happen that quick, but good things to think about. And hopefully for all of us, reading the chat, it sounds like people, the conversation is helpful and relatable. So thank you all for being here. And we will be back again next week. For those, in case you're catching this last minute, this weekend we've got a retreat in West Virginia. Would love for you to join, and send us an email, info@happyjackyoga.com. My friends, thank you so much for being here. Hanna, thank you for your reflections. Make it an amazing rest of the day.
No,
Namaste.
namaste.